Gambling Act Subcommittee on the 21st of June 2021. This meeting was scheduled to start at 2 p.m. However, it is very close to being 2:30 now, and we've just had some IT problems. I believe we've solved them by an ingenious method, but we have got everybody able to speak and be heard, so I think we'll proceed on that basis. Okay, so just to make you aware that this afternoon's meeting is recording. So if you participate further in the meeting, you are agreeing to the recording of the meeting. Can I please remind you to switch off your phones to silent and only speak if you raise your electronic hand or indicate to me that you wish to speak. The chat function at the side is not to be used for debate or asking or answering questions. It is only as a means of finding out if anybody's lost connection or something of that nature. If you ask a question, if it is possible, please indicate the number of the page in the documents that refers to your question. Okay, that being said, and I've welcomed you to the meeting, I'm going to ask for the roll call to be made. I am Councillor Suzanne Paddison and I'm the chair of this subcommittee today. Nicola, can you take everybody present through the roll call, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have Councillor Dave Whitelock.
Present, Nicola.
Thank you. Councillor Joe Hale.
Present, Nicola.
Thank you. Councillor Rydia Maison.
I'm here, Nicola.
Thank you. And then we have officers Neil Chapel.
Present.
And Gavin White.
Present, Nicola.
Thank you. We also have two guests today, Chair, plus Hannah Neary from the press. Thank you, Chair.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. I'll now go on to the item 1, which is declarations of interest. So members of the subcommittee, do you have any interest to declare? I see shaking heads. I don't. So that's fine. So Councillor Maison, on that basis then, thank you very much for waiting around while we had all those problems, but I may release you now because you're not actually required for the subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. No problem.
Okay, cheers. Okay, then we'll carry on to the agenda proper now then, which is item 3, application to vary a premises licence for the Rock and Fountain Inn. This is on pages 3 to 12 in your documents. And before I go any further, there were 2 further items that were sent through today. The map and the aerial photo, I believe you've all got those, yes? Everybody seen those? Lovely. Okay, there we are. So Mr. Chappell, could you just take the subcommittee through this application, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. This is an application by the licence holder Pauline Blackmore for the variation of her licence for the Rock and Fountain, Neath Road in Aberdillais. The application is to amend the licence to remove the condition Beer Garden 1 will have no public access as identified on the plan. As the Chair just pointed out, the plan of the premises and a Google Earth aerial image have been circulated to assist with the meeting. This application, Chair, was advertised in the prescribed manner. It resulted in 1 representation being received. This representation was from Mr. Wood, who is present today. He lives opposite the premises at property known as the Cloggery. His representation is attached at Appendix 1 to the report. Members will note from the report that an application for a new premises licence for the Rock and Fountain was received in October 2018. That also resulted in 1 representation being received in respect of this beer garden. On that occasion, it was agreed by all parties that the beer garden 1 would not be used, hence the condition that's currently attached to the licence. If I can just remind members that representations under the Licensing Act 2003 must relate to one of the 4 licensing objectives. And just briefly, they are prevention of crime and disorder, the prevention of public nuisance, public safety, the protection of children from harm. The recommendation today, Chair, is that members determine the application after hearing all submissions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chappell. Mr. White, I'm going to take Mrs. Blackmore first, and then we'll come to Mr. Wood. Okay, so you've kindly come along, and your patience has been rewarded, Mrs. Blackmore. Please tell the subcommittee what you've come to say today in support of your application.
Right. Well, in regards to Mr. Wood's objection, initially, when I agreed to the objection in 2018, it was because of an unfortunate incident. My partner had passed away. I didn't realise that he was on the full licence, so I didn't inform the council that he had passed away. Subsequently, I lost the complete licence for the whole of the establishment. At the time, I didn't have the time to argue the fact of Mr. Wood's objection, so I agreed to the objection to get the licence back so that I could reopen the establishment. Obviously, as time's gone on with COVID, etc., I haven't bothered reapplying, and now it's come to the time that I have reapplied. Now, in relation to Mr. Wood's objection letter, he goes on to say that he's objecting to the new beer garden. Please may I say that this is not a new beer garden. This beer garden has been licensed with the premises since I purchased it. I purchased the premises in 1999. It has been in various forms of construction since that time. Again, reiterating the reason I agreed to it in the 2018 objection was because the whole of the premises was closed. I go on then to say, Mr. Wood then goes on to say that he would never have purchased his establishment if he'd known that this application was going to go ahead. Once again, I say that this beer garden has been licensed since 1999, and if Mr. Wood had made inquiries at the time, he would have found this out. Then going on to the Mr. Wood's objection about being able to clearly see his house, garden, etc. You cannot see his garden at all from the beer garden. You can see part of his drive. Yes, I agree, you can see part of his drive because of the elevated position, but you cannot see his garden at all. I have tried to be neighbourly, as Mr. Wood says again in his objection. I went over and rang his doorbell. He didn't answer. I subsequently phoned him and asked him if he would come over and see the beer garden himself, so that I could, point out. I was quite prepared to put up, if I had to, some sort of like shower curtain effect or wood even, to take away anything that he thought could be seen from there. He categorically refused to come over. He said that he didn't want anything to do with that and that he would see me in committee, which is why we are here today. And basically, there's nothing else I can say apart from the fact that that beer garden has been licensed since 1999. And I just reiterate what I've said previous. I don't want to be repeating myself.
That's fine.
And basically that's it. I don't need to say anything else. So I'll just leave it.
Blackmore. Yeah, that's
No problem.
fine. You've just been given the opportunity, and if you feel that you've said everything you came to say, that's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You can stay for just turn your mic off. Right.
Okay.
There we are then. So I come now to Mr. Wood and Mr. Chappell. How are we going to do this?
Could we do questions of?
We do questions first. Yeah. Yes, of course. I've got so confuddled today. Do officers have any questions for Mrs. Blackmore? Yes, Mr. Chappell?
Yeah, I've got just a few questions if I can, Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Blackmore, thank you for that opening statement. If we go back to the licence prior to 2018, you say that
Yes.
the beer garden was licensed. I'm looking at a previous plan. I can't see that it was identified as a beer garden. However, I can see that it was within the boundaries of the property. Has that beer garden been used prior to 2018?
Not actually used as the beer garden, no.
Right.
Not actually used, as it has been in various forms of construction, as I said,
Yeah.
but it wasn't actually completed and used.
Okay. And then obviously the application came in, the new application in 2018, following the lapse of the previous license. And the beer garden obviously wasn't used within that period up until present either, except for, I think, I'm right in saying, a few temporary event notices that you've put in recently.
I did put in, yes, 3 temporary event notices, which have gone ahead. There's been no trouble there whatsoever.
Okay. And what is it that you've used the beer garden for in those circumstances? Is it just drinking, or is it for food and drinks? What type of clientele you having in there?
It's specifically only for drinking. There'll be no food served in that area. We are offering it up as a dog-friendly beer garden, because we've got a lot of walkers in the area that come with their dogs and unfortunately cannot use the main beer garden because there is food served there, so we won't have dogs in there. So we are offering that up as a drinking-only, dog-friendly beer garden.
I see. Okay. And can you tell me what the capacity of that the beer garden 1 is, please?
Well, there's actually 3 tables there. The tables seat 6 people each, so that would be actually 18 people seated. Obviously, on the capacity area, I have gone with the licensing, as it says, less than 499. So that's what I picked. It is less than 499. But actually seating, there could be 18 seated. Obviously, there could be around 20 standing, possibly, but no more than that.
Yeah, and that would be in non-COVID times. Obviously, they can't be standing in during these particular times.
Obviously that's in normal.
But going forward, it potentially would have people standing in there as well. Is that right?
Going forward, yes.
Okay. And the operation of that beer garden into the evening, do you have any particular cut-off terminal hours for that beer garden?
It's going to be the same as the other beer garden. I would imagine there wouldn't be anybody up there past 10:30, 11 o'clock, if not earlier. But I would say, the maximum would be 10:30, 11 o'clock.
So the condition attached to your the beer garden 2 across the road, that's 11 o'clock.
That's
so
11,
you'd envisage it would be a similar time to that, is that right?
It definitely wouldn't be later, no.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's okay for me for now.
Okay. Mr. White, I have to come clean. I forgot the roll call the second time. I did the roll call the first time, but we didn't do it the second time. My error. Can we take it that officers know who's present, or do we have to go through the roll call again?
No, Chair. I was under the impression that everybody knew who was in the meeting.
That's fine. It's just that I didn't go through the actual set of procedures when I restarted the meeting afterwards. So thank you very much for that. That's okay. Okay. Does anybody, any other, Mr. White, do you have any questions for Mrs. Blackmore?
Mr. Chappell asked all the questions I was going to ask, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Members of the subcommittee, do you have any questions for Mrs. Blackmore? I see no hands. I see a shaking head. Vice Chair?
No, that's better. It's unmuted. Just one question. How do people access Beer Garden 1? Is it through the pub or externally? That's not
externally.
Externally. They come back out onto the road and back in that way, is it?
They come back onto the pavement.
Yeah.
And then they go to the right of the main door, and then they find a gateway which leads up into that beer garden.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Mr. White?
Apologies, Chair. Miss Blackmore, if you were granted the Beer Garden 1 licence, out of curiosity, how would you ensure that people using the premises would be quiet?
It's exactly the same as Beer Garden 2, sir, Mr. White. There are staff that frequent it periodically, obviously, to take drinks at the moment and also to clear glasses. If there were any noise issues, then they would be dealt with immediately by a member of staff or myself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask a similar question, Mrs. Blackmore. everybody gets at the moment, because of COVID related conditions, not licensing conditions, but everybody would be it would be table service, would it? So that there would, as you say, be members coming back, members of staff coming back.
Yes, there is, yes.
Okay.
All COVID things are applied, you know, to the letter.
Councillor Joe Hale has indicated, please.
Yes, I'd just like to ask, is it only the one house that is near to the rock?
Yes, it is only Mr. Wood's house, yes.
So it's not going to be, you know, affecting a large number of people like, you know, other places then, which are surrounded by housing estates. It's just the one person.
It's just the one house, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's sort of indicated on the map here, the Google map picture. You can see the one residence there. Okay. Any other questions? No.
Chair, would you like me to ask Mr. Wood now if he would like to ask
He
questions?
wants to, yes. If you can manage that, if Mr. Wood would like to ask Mrs. Blackmore any questions.
Mr. Wood, I hope you can hear me okay. At this point, we're doing questions of currently. Would you like to ask any questions at this point?
Yeah, I think Mr. Blackmore got it wrong when she says that no one can see into the house or garden from the beer garden, because it's obviously it's higher than the gates on my fence, and I've got a lawn area to the side of the house, which the beer garden directly overlooks.
I do get your concern.
A decking patio at the side of your fence, at the top height of your fence, they're looking straight into your garden. And that's what's happening here. You know, I've got a drive with outbuildings. My house has got a lawn to the side of it, and that beer garden is directly opposite.
Mr. Wood, you will get an opportunity to put all of this to the subcommittee. At this stage, it's just specific questions, if you had any, of Mrs. Blackmore. Do you have any specific questions? You will have time to tell us everything about your objection, but do you have a specific question?
No, not really. You know, I've never ever questioned anything that Pauline and John have done over in the pub. I never ever lodged any complaints. It's just that I don't see this being fair. So
that's fine. If you have no questions, we'll come to you shortly. Thank you for that. Just keep listening in. Okay. Right. So anybody else thought of any other questions they want to ask? No. Come back to you, Mr. Chappell. Is there anything else you wish to add?
Not at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
No. Okay. Right. We'll move on then to the. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I thought somebody was attracting my attention. We'll move on then to the objector, Mr. Wood. And I would ask Mr. Wood, please now give us everything that you wish to say to the subcommittee in defence of your objection to Mrs. Blackmore's plans. Anytime you're ready, Mr. Wood.
As my letter states, that when I first come to this property, that area was just rough ground. In fact, when John decided to do something there, he was going to put some retaining walls in so it would secure his water tanks. I'm a builder by trade. I actually ordered the blocks for him to do it all. So, you know, prior to me coming to this house, there was never nothing there. There was just scrap land. There was, it's only now in the latter few years that the beer garden, as you say, in 2018, have come around. And as Mrs. Blackmore said then, you know, because we've always been friends and I've always helped them, you know, they come over here for tools, I give them building material, etc., etc. Had she said she was going ahead and building a beer garden, being neighbourly and saying that, I would have said, look, I'm going to strongly object to that because I don't want you building anything up there overlooking the house. And in fact, the only thing we knew about this licensing was Mrs. Blackmore came over and spoke to my wife and said that she was getting married and she'd like us to come to the evening do And as she was walking away, she said, "Oh, by the way, from Monday, there's going to be people up in that beer garden." And that's the first thing we heard about it. So, you know, I mean, I just think that Mrs. Blackmore has just gone around it all the wrong way. And, you know, it is an invasion of our privacy. You can see straight in here, see everything we're doing. Well, my grandchildren here, they'll be able to be seen. My wife has just gone through an illness. She's taken solace in the garden, whereas she doesn't have to wear a wig and whatever. She can just put a scarf on her head and you know, just potter around in the garden, and that's where she's taking solace from. So with people being up in that beer garden, you know, we'd have no privacy at all, and she wouldn't be able to do that. And you know, that's my feelings on it. It's
All right.
it's just not right.
Okay, Mr. Wood. As with Mrs. Blackmore, I'm going to ask officers if they have any questions for you, and when they finished, I'm going to ask members of the subcommittee if they have any questions for you. Okay, so just stay listening. Officers, do you have any questions for Mr. Wood? Yes, Mr. Chappell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Wood. If I can just address just a couple of questions to you, if I can, please. When I did my opening submissions for this report, I said that the licensing, I outlined the licensing objectives in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003, and representations that are made in respect of an application have to come under one of those 4 licensing objectives. So you've got the prevention of crime and disorder, the prevention of public nuisance, public safety, and the protection of children from harm. Okay. In relation to sort of privacy and things like that, they're very much more under sort of planning legislation rather than licensing legislation. But obviously you do mention in your representation about noise and noise nuisance in particular.
Yes.
So can I just concentrate on that aspect of your representation for a second and ask, the last couple of months there have been temporary event notices which have been applied for by the premises for use of that beer garden.
Yes.
During that those particular periods of time, have you experienced noise nuisance from that beer garden?
No, only on one occasion when there was a couple of shops up there from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 8 o'clock in the night. And by the time they got up at 8 o'clock in the night, they were starting to get a bit noisy. But no, to be honest, no, I can't say that I have.
Okay, and have you experienced noise nuisance from the that area in the past? I know it hasn't been used in 2018 or previous, so no noise nuisance reports at all from that, no?
No.
Okay, so the basis of your representations and against this proposal is that it is very much based on the loss of privacy from your garden and people being able to see into your property. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Is there anything, Mr. Wood, that you can add in relation to those 4 licensing objectives? Is there anything further you want to bring to members' attention? So if I could just remind you, prevention of crime and disorder, public nuisance, which we've addressed, public safety and protection of children from harm.
Not really, no.
No. Okay. Thank you, Chair. I'll go back to other questions.
Lovely. Mr. White, do you have any questions for Mr. Wood?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Members of the subcommittee, do you have any questions for Mr. Wood?
I have one, Chair.
Vice Chair, please. Yes.
Yes. Mr. Wood, roughly what is the distance between the beer garden and your boundary wall, or to your house? Because it's across the old A465, I believe, isn't it?
Yes, the width of the road.
Okay.
Yeah. And there appears to be some sort of pull-in as well in front of the beer garden. I'm looking at the Google Earth map that we got. There seems to be a small pull-in in front of the beer garden, then the road, then across to your property.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you wouldn't have a rough idea how far it is.
Sorry, I can't tell you that.
Would you have any idea of how far it is roughly?
How far? Well, you got 2 pavements and the width of the main road.
Satisfied, Miss
Yeah,
Councillor?
thank
Yeah.
you, Chair. Yeah.
I have a question, Mr. Wood, if you don't mind. Is there at this stage anything that, do you agree with Mrs. Blackmore that she offered to do certain things that might mitigate and that you said not really interested? Is there anything at this stage that you might say, if Mrs. Blackmore did such and such, that it would be much more acceptable to you? Is there anything like that that you could say?
Well, I wouldn't want it open till 11 o'clock in the night because, you know, as I say, if you've got 18 people standing up there and you've got 8 people seated, that's 26 people in a small confined area. That could be rather noisy, I would think, and especially later at night, you know, when the beer gets in a bit, it does get a bit noisier.
Apart from limiting the number of people, I was thinking more of, I think she offered to put up some sort of tarpaulin curtain type thing. Nothing like that would help you, was it?
Well, no, I think if Mrs. Blackmore put fencing up there, I don't think anybody would want to go up there because there's no way you can see out of there. It's surrounded on 2 sides by trees. On the 3rd side, because it's the piece of ground that's right next door to the pub, not the one he's showing on the Google map. It's not the green area. It's the one right next door, right adjacent to the pub. So,
yes, we understand that.
They got the public house on one side. The only thing they got is the fence in front. So if you was to fence that, you know, nobody could see out there. It would be an completely enclosed area.
Well, I'm not really asking you whether people would use the area. I'm just asking you at this stage, when we come to look at the application, if there was anything that you would accept in mitigation that might help your side of the argument.
Well, yeah, if they could do something about the privacy where people couldn't see out there into my garden. Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
Yes. Sorry, Chair. Can I just clear something up? So the house is actually the cloggery, and the piece of land for the beer garden, which it was just said, is going to be right by. I'm looking at the map now. The pub. Yeah. So it's not adjacent to the house. Am I right in that?
Not adjacent to the house where Mr. Wood lives. No, it's right, the other side of the road. It's adjacent to the licensed
opposite, house. But it's nowhere. It's not going to be looking into his house because it's further up the road. Yes.
I think
it's not showing right in the plan. The Google plan is showing a green area where the arrow is. It's not. It's the waste ground by the side. It's the
side to the left,
right adjacent to the pub.
Yeah, I think it just goes under the tree at that point, the waste ground, isn't it?
So the right-hand side of the tree.
That's correct, I think.
Right,
yes.
Okay, so it's not opposite the property then?
No. It's right opposite the drive, yeah.
The drive, yes.
Drive, yes.
Yeah, right opposite my drive, which is further down than my house.
Yeah.
So you can see the drive.
So not even the garden. Not even opposite your garden then. It's just the drive and whatever is next to it. The garden's the other side.
Yeah, but the garden's to the garden. As you're looking at the map, the garden's to the right of the drive. You can see the green area, the lawn area going around the top of the house.
Yes, but it's not. Again, that isn't opposite that piece of land.
Okay.
That's right opposite that piece of land. Yes.
Right. Okay. I think it's marked on the as beer garden 1. Yes, that's where you're looking at, Joe. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Chappell has indicated he wishes to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just had an additional question for Mr. Wood on something that he said in his submissions.
Yep.
Was that with in relation to the noise nuisance, he said he certainly wouldn't want people sitting up there or being out there until 11 o'clock at night. Can I just ask Mr. Wood if you would if it's not acceptable for 11 o'clock, is there a terminal hour that you would have in mind that would be more acceptable to you?
Well, yeah, you know, that particular garden in itself, it's only when the sun goes in the day, which goes very early, about 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's quite cold and dark up there. So, you know what I mean? At 6 o'clock, I think would be a good cutoff point for that, 6 or 7 o'clock. I certainly wouldn't want to hear anything, you know, any more noise later than that.
So for noise nuisance issues, you would say 6, 7 o'clock in the evening would be more acceptable rather
Yes.
than 11. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I just
I'm not trying to be unreasonable. I'm trying to be reasonable. I'm trying, you know, not to be unreasonable at all.
Right. Mr. Wood, I have just one more thing to sort of run past you. Mr. Chappell has outlined the 4 reasons under the licensing objectives that we can actually take into account when adjudicating this today. So you've said that you don't have noise when during the TENS, the temporary event notices, the 3 of them, that you haven't had noise. But have people been in the garden then? In the beer garden that's we're talking about today?
Mr. Chappell, I can't quite. There's a lot of noise coming off the speaker there.
That's okay, Mr. Wood. The chair was just inquiring when there have been temporary event notices at the premises. Have there been people in the beer garden? Was there noise experienced, and what time were they there until?
Yes, there was people in there. To be fair, there wasn't a lot of noise, and they were there till about 7. Most people would only be there till 6, 7 o'clock. And there was one occasion when there was some people there later, which that did get a little bit noisy in the evening, but only on one occasion.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wood. I don't have any further questions. I'm just wondering if anybody does have anything further they wish to say. I'll come back to Mr. Chappell. Do you want to sum up at all, or?
No, that's not necessary for this particular meeting, Chair. So.
Okay.
Does Ms. Blackmore have any questions, Chair, for Mr. Wood?
Oh, quite correct. Yes, Mrs. Blackmore. Do you have any questions for Mr. Wood?
Not directly for Mr. Wood, no.
Okay.
I do have a question, but not directly to Mr. Wood.
Okay. Who do you want to address the question to then?
To the meeting in general, basically about the time of closing the beer garden. You know,
Okay,
I would quite.
I'll come back to the 2 speakers now just to sum up. If you've had any other thoughts since you spoke, and if there's anything you wish to say to the subcommittee before we adjudicate. So I'll come first to Mrs. Blackmore.
Yeah, as I said, I'd be quite amicable to change the time of closing to 10 o'clock. I think that's quite reasonable. I think 6 o'clock is unreasonable. I say I'm quite happy to close it at 10 o'clock. In all fairness, as Mr. Wood has stated, I don't think there would be anybody up there after around 8:30 because it is dark up there, and but I think 10 o'clock closing is a very reasonable time to ask the committee, and that's all I want to say.
Thank you, and thank you for coming today, Mrs. Blackmore.
No problem. Thank you for doing the meeting. Thank you very much.
Mr. Wood, do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to say to the subcommittee?
Mr. Chappell, could you?
Yeah, Mr. Wood, the chair is inquiring whether you want to sum up anything. Is there anything else you want to say now? Is your last opportunity to speak before the meeting?
No, that's fine. No, that's okay. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for coming and giving us the benefit of what you had to say there today, Mr. Wood. Right, we'll go to the adjudication part of it now. So, do we normally do this in private? Or, yes, I'll have to. Right, I haven't got any notes for that, but we would have to proceed for the adjudication in a private session. So we'll have to move to private, just for the benefit of the fact that it shouldn't be in the public interest what we're discussing. So can I have a proposer that we move to a private session, please?
I propose, Chair.
Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Hale. So we now stand in private session. So could you?
Stop the recording, Chair.
Stop the recording, yes, that's fine.